So the reason I chose to run goes back to my own childhood. So I'm going to tell a story about that. So when I look back on my early childhood, I also start thinking about early adulthood. And that leads to thinking about my mom and my dear late father and the tough odds that they faced here in this community in their early adulthood. So if you're like me, you like a good coming-of-age story, so I'm going to give you one. So picture young John Walter, Jack Rowsey of Pea Ridge Road, and Linda Lou Brady of Depot Street in Barboursville. And so they were carefree Barboursville High School graduates in the mid-50s, in the old Happy Days era. And so like most people of their time, they got married young. And it was just a month or so after my mom turned 18. So you just think about people today doing that. Through family connections, Jack got an unskilled job at American Car and Foundry. He went to Marshall College for one semester, but then before they became exposed to the concept of contraception, they rather unwittingly joined the baby boom. So in 1956, Linda gave birth to a baby girl. In 1957, Linda gave birth to another baby girl. Then Jack, whose lack of fine motor skills became the stuff of legend, got laid off. So in 1958, he was drawing unemployment, and Linda gave birth to a third baby girl, who was born with a cleft palate and needed several facial surgeries just starting out. Now, this young couple, 21, 22 years old at this point, they owed money to 5 doctors. They had no car. They had no phone. They had almost no grocery money. The most entertainment that Linda said she had was feeding the babies to American Bandstand. So, and then my grandmother, the grandparents were around. My grandmother would bring over Sunday dinners, and she would make beautiful baby clothes. And so Jack and Linda had the best dressed poor kids in Barboursville. So in 1960, Jack finally caught a break through another family connection and discovered he had a skill. He was an excellent salesman. So he was promoted at a job for Nabisco, which meant moving to Indianapolis. And so the Rowsey family became part of that era's great exodus out of West Virginia. So that's where my childhood, as the third baby girl, my story kind of picks up here. We would travel about once a month. We would come back to visit my grandparents and my aunts and uncles and my cousins. So we moved, we came back from Indiana, and it was always coming home to be with our relatives in West Virginia. So later on, Mike was actually playing Take Me Home Country Roads a little bit ago, and that song resonates with so many people, and it really captures the feeling that I had as a child. It was that almost physical feeling of being homesick for West Virginia. It really was the place I belonged. So, to me, as a child coming back from Indiana to West Virginia and Huntington, the grass was literally greener here. I grew up knowing this place as a wonderful place to be a kid. And beyond my family, I always felt the reality that we had the kindest people here. It was different here. It was better here. I knew that, and I've always had that perspective since we came back. So we moved back in 1971. I got through junior high, went to Barboursville High School, graduated from Marshall. And while I was at college, I met this young man over here in the black shirt, Chuck Minsker. Wave. And he was working at Channel 13 back when they were shooting news on film and cutting film, literally cutting the film. So we met while I was at Marshall, and we always assumed, just like my parents, that we would have to leave this area to find work. And we got lucky. I mean, we toughed it out. And we started out on the west end of Huntington, and we ended up in Pea Ridge in the same house where my dad grew up. And we just determined that here is where we had to raise our kids. And it wasn't always easy to do that. We had our struggles. We built a solid middle-class life. Our life has been enriched by our relationships in this community. We've done a lot of community volunteering, and it's really meant a whole lot. For us, West Virginia is still a great place to raise kids. Huntington is a great place to raise a family. But tragically, that is not the case, as we know, for a lot of families today. We know we have urgent problems. Too many people, and I think of the young versions of Jack and Linda Rowsey, coming up today that don't have a lot, and the temptations and the challenges that people are facing today. We've got too many people who are working and they're still struggling because our economy is out of balance. The wealth inequality has tipped the scales against middle-class families, working-class families, poor families. So it's a struggle to make ends meet, much less raise a family now. Like our two sons and most of their friends, too many of them have left the state with no intention of coming back. I want to change that. And I think, I look at my life and I think that, I loved it here, so I think they do love it here, and maybe, we can get some people to come back. But what's really worse is too many children in our community right now are hungry. I think that's criminal. I think the fact that children are going hungry in Cabell County, where there is a lot of resources and a lot of wealth, but to me that's just something that I don't think we should let stand. Way too many of our college graduates, I have people working with me on my campaign team that are so saddled with student debt that even a college degree is not going to guarantee them an income that will let them live and raise a family here. Way too many parents of kids, and this, in my line of work with children's mental health and child abuse prevention, I've learned and talked to families who have children with developmental disabilities who are trying to get services for their children, and they get put on waiting lists that last as long as 10 years to get services. By the time they're services they needed yesterday, and they're waiting until they're teenagers to get these really vital services. And then, as we know, way too many families have had a loved one's life cut short by drug addiction. The overcrowding in our jails, I know our county commission is dealing with this all the time, just the bills and the crisis in our jails. It's a symptom of our state's failure to put families and children first. We're paying for things that were neglected for years in terms of, providing the support that families need early on. So, that's something that always concerns me. And the other thing that concerns me now, and the reason I'm running, is that way too few of our legislators have made solving these problems their number one priority. In the last couple years, the GOP majority at the Capitol has taken our state in a dangerous direction for the future of our children and families. The current political climate is so toxic that a lot of good problem-solving ideas by legislators of both parties never sees the light of day, because they're just shutting the door to certain solutions. So this hurts my state. It hurts me. It hurts the families that live with us. It hurts our ability to grow our economy. And as grandparents, all of us here, parents, grandparents, aunts, uncles, great-grandparents, taxpayers, it hurts all of us. So there's a familiar saying that I was thinking about that goes back to the mid-1800s, women and children first. So that was kind of not only a slogan, but it was kind of a policy or code of conduct. And we think about the Titanic, and we think about, just kind of the, just the standard where women, children, and the most vulnerable passengers are saved first in a life-threatening situation. So when we look at our young working families of today, the single moms, the grandparents raising grandkids, the families wrecked by the drug epidemic, and then we look at the decisions that our legislature is making, it is not women and children first, it's every man for himself. And that has to stop, and that's why I'm running. So, I'm hoping to shift the balance of power, to bring it back to at least, if we can't take back the majority of the House and the Senate, that we can at least have a closer balance where people will reason and work as problem solvers. And most of all, I want to serve as a strong voice for children and families and fight for our future together. And so, that we can all stay here and have a good standard of living and see our neighbors having a good standard of living. So this is the year that we need to change our political conversation, to stop the exodus of our promising but struggling young folks. So I want to work to bring back a state where anybody would choose to raise their families. And so your support today and every dollar that's contributed today will go to amplify and magnify that message, using the airwaves, using every available medium we have to change the conversation and get people to focus on the needs of kids and families. So I thank you. I'm Jeanette Rowsey. I'm running for House of Delegates. I appreciate your support. Thank you. Thank you.